Hello and welcome to this edition of Midday Mentors. I'm Richard Pharro. I'm the CEO of APMG International, and today I'm delighted to be talking to Mark Thomas. Now, I've known Mark for a number of years, and he has a wide range of skills and talents and capabilities. But today I'm talking to him as an IT governance expert with worldwide global experience working for large, small, and not-for-profit organizations. So hello, Mark, and welcome to this edition of Midday Mentors.
Richard, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to chat with you on Midday Mentors. I appreciate it.
So, Mark, we're talking in the time of COVID-19. Now, technology is moving too quickly to keep up. COVID has meant that we put some of our development projects on hold. I run an SME, a small, medium-sized enterprise. What are the top disruptive areas I should be concerned about that are passing me by while I'm not able to update and move my technology forward?
And that is a very common question I get, Richard, from large corporations to small to medium enterprises, because we've had a massive impact with say COVID-19, and with this lack of interpersonal contact, workplace culture has been severely impacted. And so as a result, many organizations are focusing just on being able to get this remote workforce. But I will tell you, if I were looking at some of the things that if I were in your shoes, I would really focus on, and some of these are the same things we've seen in the past. Number one is cyber threat sophistication is continuing to grow right now. So we're focusing on workplace productivity in the home. We're getting better at protection, but bad actors are also getting more sophisticated. So again, that's nothing new, but I would tell you, I don't believe we've seen the end of the creativity that we're seeing from the cyber threat. I would still move forward with digital transformation. And what's interesting is when you look at digital transformation, it doesn't matter if you're a small business or if you're a large business, you still have to move forward with making your business digital. Now, that's not 100% of the organizations out there. I would say from an IT perspective, whether you have a one-person IT shop or a 1,000-person IT shop, I really think having a more agile, high-velocity type of IT or agile or DevOps type of situation, I think would really help, because that allows for your business agility. And right now, I do not believe that we're in the new normal. I do not think there's a next normal. I think that this is going to be a fast-paced, changing environment. Would you agree with me on that one?
I think you're right with that. I mean, clearly COVID-19 will come to an end, and the health issues will go away. But I think the transformation of organizations with people wanting to work from home, realizing they can work from home, the fact you can now have video conferences and conference calls with people all over the world, literally for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
It's very hard to think, will I ever sign off that expense account for someone to fly halfway around the world to meet somebody they already know? I think that's most unlikely. Okay, that first contact, maybe you'll do it. But you mentioned IT organizations. Now, I keep hearing that IT organizations are actually being replaced by new and innovative ways. We're using the cloud. We got things on the cloud. We still have an IT organization in-house. But will I always need an in-house IT organization, or will I be able to let it go to the cloud providers, who also seem to be raising their game regarding security and defending against those innovative actors? And I'm sad to say, but Microsoft and Google are more wealthy than we are. So they got more money to invest in that thing. So why don't I leave it to them? What do I need to do in here?
Yeah, I agree with you there. And for anyone who's been in a business that's relied on IT over the last several years, and who hasn't, right? You know the frustration that comes from watching your IT team struggle to operate more complex systems, right? Much less deliver, say, new capabilities. And digital being now mainstream in all types and sizes of businesses, it's across every sector. So I think there's I think we need to take a real look at the supply chain of vendors, and we'll talk cloud here specifically in a few minutes. But I truly believe that a lot of businesses are running on older operating models in many organizations, and that doesn't cut it anymore. I believe that the original or the traditional organization of IT is now going away, and so we're seeing the birth of a new type of organization. And really, we've seen this pushed along the service management side for quite some time. It's more of a customer-centric, more connected, more collaborative type of environment. But here's what's interesting, Richard, is, and I see this in many organizations, that I believe there's no longer a separation between business strategy and technology strategy.
Agreed.
I think there's just strategy. Because now, as a business owner or as a major corporation, the majority of your initiatives, you can't achieve those goals without technology, and I think that's an important piece that we're starting to see that convergence.
But you see, this worries me a little bit because I'm so dependent upon a cloud provider. Right? Okay, now they're huge organizations, they're well managed, but what about governance? How do I know that what the cloud provider tells me is actually true? I can't send an email to Amazon or Google or someone like that, or Microsoft, and say, can you tell me how you protect my stuff? Can you give me a breakdown of how you manage my risk? So who audits those organizations to make sure that they deliver on the promise in terms of security, data protection, and what have you? Does anybody?
Yeah, so I would say that having been a cloud service provider in the past, I can give you some insight into this. Now, there's a sliding scale. You can go with a big provider, say AWS or Azure, and they generally will have very little flexibility in any negotiations. But you go with a smaller boutique, and there's somewhat some more negotiable aspects of that agreement. So that sliding scale depends on how much influence you can have over the negotiation cycle. Now, I will say either way, but there's still a benefit to going to the cloud. But some of the things I think are important here is if you move to a smaller, more boutique type of cloud provider where you have more influence in the negotiation, think about the business viability, right? As cloud computing continues to mature, a lot of these providers may be going out of business or get purchased by larger companies. So there's risk and continuity there, right?
And they're probably subcontracting most of the infrastructure to the bigger player anyway. They're just a middleman charging me a little bit on top to actually provide that service. So I'm not really getting a boutique or bespoke solution, am I, Mark? What I'm getting is basically a route to the big guys.
Absolutely, because they may be using those same core services from larger organizations that you might not see in the background. So I would suggest to a lot of folks looking, whether you're going on a larger organization or more on the boutique side, I believe there are a couple of things that, from a diligence perspective, I think you look at. Number one is compliance requirements, right? Because we have, and we may talk more compliance in a little bit, but with all it's mind-boggling the amount of compliance that we have now globally. So how do you know that organization is compliant? Larger organizations, you generally say, of course, they're Microsoft, they're compliant. But when you go to a smaller, more boutique, how do you know this stuff? So many organizations are not going to allow you with, say, the right to audit. So you won't be able to walk into my organization and audit me, but I can provide you a statement of compliance from a reputable firm that can give you some ease that those compliance requirements are being met.
And that clearly is, it's not what we're here to talk about. That causes us some issues these days. We've seen the compliance reports of the auditors about organisations that were going concerns, and they weren't in a few years' time. But sticking with compliance, I mean, you do a lot of work in data privacy. Yeah, in Europe we have GDPR. I don't know what you currently have in the US because I know that Safe Harbor has been replaced by something. There's probably other standards around the world. How can anybody, seriously, how can anybody afford the work that is necessary to be compliant in every jurisdiction on all the data protection stuff when people have the right to be forgotten? How does that work?
Yeah, Richard, this is tough. The global compliance landscape, right? Like I said, it's mind blowing. And what's happening, I believe, it is tipping this scale between what we call performance and performance, or excuse me, performance and compliance. Because as an organization, if I went, it's forcing me to become checklist compliant because I'm so worried about the next audit where I want to check the box. I had a client just 2 months ago who was audited by their holding company. They basically failed an audit, and they called and said, can you help us become compliant to this checklist? But my response was this. I said, you can't be compliant to every checklist out there. There's this balance, and what you have to really do, it goes back to, I love to talk about risk. Which areas of high risk do you need to be compliant to, and which areas may you be willing to accept? And that whole non-compliance thing scares people, because you don't want to violate any legal or regulatory requirements. In North America, we do know that the global GDPR, well, North America is following suit. The challenge we're going to see, I believe, is every state in North America at some point is going to have their own version of GDPR. So not only will I have GDPR, I'm going to have every state, California, New York, and so on.
So not only are there 180 odd countries in the world, all with their own standard, there's going to be 50 versions of it in the US alone. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. But,
I will tell you, Richard, I don't think the barrage of compliance and regulatory concerns are over yet. We talked a little bit ago about some emerging things coming on. I don't think we're finished with the cybersecurity. I don't think we're finished with the privacy. Hot topics, obviously, from an international perspective, diversity and inclusion, those types of things. And I think we will continue to have more requirements that could possibly put some companies into a position where they can no longer perform.
I think that is a real risk. The cost of compliance, the cost of conforming in the first place, maintain it, monitoring it and auditing it, in a world where everything else is getting cheaper, but that overhead is getting more expensive, is going to cause a huge issue at some time. Okay, it's okay if you're a huge organization with the profits to afford to be able to do that. But if you're a small, medium-sized enterprise, it is a real challenge.
It is.
But one question I have for you, Mark, as someone who's been in this space a long time, what is the future of the CIO? Where does the CIO sit within this landscape in a few years' time? Will we still have CIOs?
It's interesting is if you look at organizations today, one of my positions in the past has been, sometimes I believe we have too many chiefs. And what that does, it creates accountability. I've seen roles with a C-level role with literally 0 direct reports. Not that that's a requirement to be a chief in this, but I still think the idea of the CIO is still valid. If you think about years back, we used to have IT managers, then IT directors, but what we needed was a role that was a business thinking role that could translate technology to the business. So I don't think the CIO role itself goes away. The name may change, but I still think even if we're going to the cloud, I still believe that role is still required. Now, I will say that there's going to be a transition with IT organizations, because now with business units becoming more dependent on technology and business units being more technology savvy, we may start seeing this convergence of more technology people integrated into the business. Which kind of goes to the whole business relationship management idea too, I think.
And I think business relationship management is one of the growing professions that we can see. Yeah, that link between the business and the IT. Now, hopefully, give them a decade or so, they'll have worked themselves out of a role, because the link between business and IT will be seamless. But on that journey there, we do need business relationship managers in large numbers.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think from a training, from an understanding, certification perspective, I think it's one of the most solid things out there, because again, what we're trying to do is remove these silos, and with this whole digital transformation effort and technology driving strategy, I think that link is crucial to the success of a business.
Mark, what advice would you give to me about how you see the future changing over the next, let's say over the next 3 to 6 months, or maybe even a longer term, but not in 5 or 10 years' time? Short-term change I should be aware of.
Yeah, Richard, we've talked about a lot of disruptive things happening. We've talked about a lot of changes in our environment. I truly believe that the key to business survival, business agility through the next several changes we're going through is organizational change management. We've seen many failures of organizations by not looking at the organizational changes that need to take place in order to succeed.
And what do you mean by organizational change management?
So preparing the organization, preparing the people for changes that are taking place. I believe that because we're moving so fast, we as organizations and as governance professionals sometimes don't think about the people side of that change, preparing our people from a education, knowledge, skills, and abilities perspective, as well as having them involved in the process of determining where we're going as a business, so they really understand, because too many folks keep their resources in the dark and say, we're changing. I believe that is the key point on this, is open communication from an organizational perspective and transparency. I will tell you, if you're going to succeed as a business in this next wave of disruptions, I believe organizational change management is the key.
Yeah, Mark, it's always good talking to you. It's good catching up with you on governance, but as always, we're very wide ranging in the conversations we have. Maybe we should catch up again in a few months to see what has happened in the world, maybe a post-COVID-19 world. So really good talking to you.
Thank you very much. I always enjoy our discussions. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Bye.